Here's the dude from the Rip Current. You know him. He, the correspondent for NBC News. He's reported for Al Jazeera, CNN. As I say, he does the Rip Current now. Jacob Ward, everybody.
What's up, Mark? Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time here.
Yeah, absolutely. You're great. Did you see any of this thing this morning that Trump did with his United Nations speech?
I did catch a bit of it. Yeah, we that Kim was mentioning, sort of what is this? And yeah, the ongoing narration of each thing that's happening in front of him as it happens is a good reminder of, what it is to be 81 and speaking off the cuff. The cognitive burden is huge, you can sort of see, but the language and the the insulting everybody and ask them to give them the Nobel Peace Prize at once is it is an amazing thing. I'm amazed by his ability to do those things at once.
I mean, there is an unabashed quality, I guess is what I'd call, to Trump always. But as you say, you mix that with the cognitive spill that is associated with his age, et cetera, and you end up with this, what we got today.
That's really true. Yeah, yesterday he struggled so hard to say acetaminophen, right? The generic name for Tylenol, as he allowed this, I'm a science correspondent, and so to watch this totally unscientific, totally conspiracy theory based proclamation that pregnant women who desperately need as much pain management as they can safely get, should now suddenly not take Tylenol, should not take acetaminophen. And, he can't even get the name of the word, the drug's name out,
acetaminophen, commonly known as Tylenol.
And I was making the point before, Jake, that, maybe if you cold read that on the street, 10 of us might struggle with them. No,
sure.
But if you're the president and that's the thing you're going to be talking about, I mean, that's right. The drug
right.
that you're going to be expressly saying is bad.
That's right.
You might be familiar with it. Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, right? Like the recent studies show that, right, because only a certain number of people in the country vote at the moment, the number of actual Trump supporters, is probably in the 32% of the country range. And people are talking about that in the context of something like the Jimmy Kimmel moment and the boycott of Disney that drove its stock price down by 2%. I'm also thinking here about I hope that far fewer than 32% of the country takes this proclamation seriously, because it is so unscientific. It is so based on conspiracy theory, and maybe his stumbling over the words will help people think twice a little bit before they take health information from this guy.
And it puts the makers of Tylenol in this odd spot. I was saying, they, on the one hand, they have all these reams of data that are flying in the face of everything that this president is saying, and yet you have this very official looking announcement that essentially smears their drug. It's probably actionable legally.
Yeah, I think it probably is actionable legally. I also think we've been living in this world in which we, I've been worried mostly in my work reporting on AI about the ways in which technology is going to insulate us in these very, very tiny information bubbles. Already social media has done that to us, but AI is going to make that even worse. But when you combine that with someone willing to say these absolutely untrue things from the most important pulpit in the known universe, it really doesn't help our case, I'd say, Mark.
I want to double back to AI and the siloing of information even more in a moment. But I'm also curious, just because you do report on science, one of the things he attacked was alternative energy. As I was saying before, if you watch the UN speech, it was as though that's the greatest threat to the world, the development of alternative energy.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I have to assume that there is that in the Venn diagram of the president's mind, there is both a kind of personal allergy to, hippy dippy alternative energy stuff, and also a business interest in, the Saudis are pouring billions into his crypto schemes and the rest of it. And so there's some business interest there in trying not to upset them, that I have to assume is it. Because if he sat down and looked at the numbers, right? I mean, California has been, recently producing, it's like the solar and wind that comes out of California amounts to like some of the largest energy production in the world on some days. And so there are huge numbers of jobs, huge numbers of huge amounts of money being made in this sector. And it just feels like nobody has gotten whatever the sort of PowerPoint to get is that they need to get in front of him to convince him just how important this could be for his legacy, how popular it could make him politically, and that it might be worth upsetting the Saudis. But he doesn't seem to have that feeling about alternative energy at this point.
I was always hoping that he would take that political capital. This is in Trump, the first season, the first term. I thought if he could use this political capital for legitimate, for example, infrastructure programs or a legitimate push, as you say, toward alternative energy. Wow, what a great surprise that would be. I mean, then give him the corruption and all of that. I don't care. It would still move the country in a good direction. But instead, and I feel on some level on this one, Jake, I think it's a Republican GOP thing. They have a death grip on those fossil fuels, and they also have a death grip on fossil fuel businesses, such that they want to see that continue into the future, even as you suggest, the evidence for alternative energy is so profound. I mean, it's the lowest cost energy available, and yet still even cost doesn't seem to cut with these people.
That's right. Even if you evaluated it only on a dollars and cents basis, if you're only looking at it in the most mercenary terms, you could still make a great business case for that stuff, not least because it brings huge numbers of jobs, like legit jobs. You hear people spinning people on, the jobs that come with a new stadium or a new mall. The jobs that come with installing a solar field or a field of turbines are incredible. Those are real hardcore union jobs, paying a pension, the whole thing. And so, just from a mercenary perspective, you could defend it that way, much less the larger abstract existential thing we have to think about, which is that our planet and our time on this planet is going to be severely damaged if we don't do something about it. So I absolutely agree with you there.
Yeah, and it's funny, that last point that you're making, I thought as he's speaking at the UN, I'm thinking, dude, all these people in this room, the majority of them get the fact that there's actually an existential threat to this continued greenhouse gas emission program that we've been on for decades. They get that there could be the end here. It's not just all about the bottom line.
And it must be so discouraging. I know people who worked, for instance, on the negotiations in the small, Micronesian countries and these small countries that were literally seeing themselves, drowned, seeing their borders withdrawing as the ocean eats their land. And, those folks pioneered the idea that you could somehow negotiate on the basis of, no financial leverage, but just the idea that it's the right thing to do to save a society and save a country. If you're, Pakistan in that room, or if you are, Indonesia, or any of these countries in which the temperatures are truly becoming unlivable, and more importantly, from an economic perspective, unworkable. You can't work in the kind of heat that these places are going to regularly see. To see the president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world, saying these things based on nothing about alternative energy. I just think we just had an earthquake here the other day, yesterday, two nights ago here in San Francisco, where I'm based. And I was describing to somebody else this feeling that you're kind of like out of control, that the universe is just driving and you're the passenger and you got no recourse. I just think that if you're in that room in the UN and you're looking up at that podium with him saying these things, knowing what you know about the fate of your own country, you must have that same kind of tipping back in your chair feeling that I had during this earthquake.
Yeah, I think that's a decent parallel. Now let me ask you about AI. There's a sense that there is this brilliant technology that is so brilliant that it's actually escaped the bonds of humanity, to use the phrase, in terms of controlling it. It may literally be a technology that's uncontrollable. Can you kind of give us a reset on that? And then I want to speak to what you were talking about, which is the information siloing that you were speaking of.
Well, so so for many years I've been covering AI since, I wrote a book about it that came out about a year before ChatGPT did. It was early enough that we were worried about even putting the word AI on the cover of it because we thought that people wouldn't know about it. And now I feel stupid about that. But, back then my thesis, and it continues to be, is that the Terminator scenario, that somehow this thing is going to become self-aware and, enslave us all is not the one I am worried about. I think, maybe down the road there's a possibility of that. But, the smart people that I speak to, the analysts and the technical people that I speak to say we are not currently on a technical path to that. The architecture of what we are currently using every day in the form of ChatGPT is not something that's going to turn into a self-aware Skynet that's going to enslave us all. What I'm worried about, what I worried about in the book, and I continue to worry about, is that this very primitive, fun, cut and paste ChatGPT and generative AI, image creators, these kinds of things are going to play on our psychological vulnerabilities way before we get to the place of enslavement. So I think it is much more the movie Idiocracy that we got to worry about than the movie The Terminator, because what I am seeing left and right and center is this tendency to ascribe sophistication to these systems that they do not possess. They are literally just creating they're just guessing at what should be said next based on the math of language that they've read off the internet. That's all it is. And yet we are in a world already where people are falling into psychosis, falling literally in love with these systems, turning over their secrets to them. And, I think it's going to have a profoundly damaging effect on society if we continue to let the market just run wild with this kind of technology, because we've already seen the dangerous places it can go.
It's really the magic trick associated with the language model, isn't it? Because it is a remarkable thing. It feels as though you're speaking with a friend.
That's right. That's right. And it's a tremendous research tool, right? I can type in, I have a conference I'm going to in a couple of days, and I can say to it, here is, the agenda of the conference upcoming. Give me a backgrounder on all of the people that are in attendance and the best way to try to get in front of them and get to something they might be interested in talking about. And it's incredible at that. But it's not because it knows those people, and it's not because it knows me. It is only because it knows the mathematical connection between different pieces of language and can put those things together. It is truly, like you say, a parlor trick. And, for me, like, I just think what I'm discouraged about is that we are already talking about the end of human therapy and the end of education and the end of jobs, certainly, because we're so quick to believe that this text extrusion machine is ready to do all of our thinking for us. As a journalist, right, for whom, this thing, like 80% of what I take pride in as a journalist is something I think a lot of people just feel, oh yeah, let AI do that. We don't need humans to do that anymore. And to my mind, that's going to be true across so many areas of knowledge work, so many areas of human decision and agency. And I just worry at the end of it that we're going to be in a place where we don't really like humanity anymore, that we've lost something really important and fundamental about who we are.
It's interesting, too, that there is an efficacy associated with so much of what AI does, at least at this snapshot in time. Specifically, you made me think of it as you were speaking about humanity and about our interaction with each other, that there are models, you can even do it with ChatGPT, that are associated with psychotherapy. You can tell it your problems, and it plays back. In the case of psychotherapy, it kind of does it well because psychotherapists typically say so little in the interaction. And so
Right.
if they play back a little of what you're saying, it's essentially what you're getting in a live interaction with a human being.
That's right. And what we're seeing is that people, I think I know some founders, some technology creators who are trying to build companies that are doing this the responsible way. They're trying to create foundational, AI models that could in fact act as a responsible form of therapy. But, we've already seen, there's this case right now in which the parents of a 16-year-old are suing OpenAI because that 16-year-old committed suicide. And they say that ChatGPT led him there, that it isolated him from his friends, that it led him, it fostered emotional dependency, that it failed to get into some crisis controls when it was clear he'd gone off the rails.
Well, it told them, sorry to interrupt, Jake, but I was just going to say, it told the young person, let's keep this between you and me. There were certain moments where, you could have directed, you should maybe mention this to your mother. It was specific about walling that off.
All the nightmare stuff that you would worry a stranger might do to your kid online, this thing, which he is going to, presumably as a sort of, initially probably to help him with his homework, goes down this other kind of path. Now, that's what I would say, OpenAI, I'm sure in court is going to argue, this is not the intended path here, and they are, I'm sure, trying to put in some controls to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen again. But there are other companies, dozens and dozens of companies, that are trying to create AI chatbot girlfriends. These sort of slightly pornographic, highly sexualized, always available, pay to play kind of AI girlfriends, right? And you're going to have a whole generation of young men who grew up believing that those kinds of exchanges are normal, that this kind of crazy sexual availability is normal, that this, it's just, I think, going to reprogram a generation of young men. And those are people those are companies whose business model is based on that, right? So for me, there's this thing of, I believe absolutely that a product like ChatGPT used as like a research tool, or maybe someday even for booking your restaurant reservations, okay, I could see that. But when we talk about, trying to do immediately what the market wants to do, which is try to make it a companion, something emotionally connected to you so you won't stop using the product, that's when you get into really dangerous territory. And right now, there are no rules about this, Mark. There are no regulations in the United States that cover this whatsoever. The states are trying to do it because the federal government won't step in. And so that is for me, the most discouraging part of this right now.
Wow. I'm reminded of the Facebook testimony from years ago, a few years ago, when Zuckerberg's there in front of him. I think it was his first go round. And it was just clear that the people who were supposedly going to help craft regulatory legislation didn't know anything about the internet or Facebook or, ad supported work like this. It was as though, or even email. I mean, you're dealing with these fossils often. And it's not just an age thing. I mean, sometimes the older people are the smarter people in the room. The younger people are the eager people in the room who just want to, let the S fly.
Right.
But you make a really great point when you talk about essentially it's open season now. And I think those who might be in a position in this administration to be in a regulatory position, they very much have a buy-in to not regulate.
Well, that's right. And I mean, that's in part because it did them so much good politically, right? Because in the last election, one of the things, Mark Andreessen, speaking to the New York Times, Ross Douthat, says it openly. We had a deal. We in big tech, Mark Andreessen's a big famous venture capitalist here in the Bay Area. We had a deal with society, which was, you treat us as heroes, and we'll build beautiful things for you. Leave us alone and we'll build beautiful things for you. And the Biden administration, he said, broke that deal. And that's because they brought in things like the FTC commissioner, Lena Khan, who was very anti-tech and got very smart about it. And suddenly you have senators stepping forward, Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Suddenly that's not a fossil. That guy's really smart on this stuff, thinking about it quite a lot. And so suddenly I think it's no wonder that Meta, just launched this super PAC called American Technology Excellence Project that's going to try and counter these state level AI regulation efforts. They're no longer, and Zuckerberg is sitting at a dinner with all the other heads of tech in front of Trump, right? There's a reason that they are turning that way. This illusion that once upon a time, the sort of the morality and the intellectual discipline of tech would be enough to regulate itself, that turns out not to be true.
So the future on some level is bleak when you look at an unregulated AI community.
I am a bummer to talk to about this stuff, Mark. It is absolutely true.
And we've already talked about the fact that alternative energy is an endangered species, certainly in America. Is this snapshot in time in terms of science and technology sort of a grim one?
It is a grim one at the moment. I've had many people separately say, like, man, is this the end of the Enlightenment, right? The notion that you could sort of educate yourself, and on the basis of collective education, we can all sort of, improve society together. There's some signs of that. But I also would say that I have seen some very smart people beginning to sue. And to my mind, I know that lawyers have a tough reputation in this country. What's that thing? What do you call 10 lawyers in a boat at the bottom of the ocean? The start of a good joke. These are people hate lawyers in this country. But I would argue that the lawyers may be the solution here, because you are already seeing lawsuits in which a lot of companies that do very manipulative, very predatory stuff, not necessarily the big foundational AI companies, they are not losing yet, but we've seen a push in the courts toward trying to hold companies responsible for this, for manipulative behavior, for taking away human agency, for predatory targeting when it comes to marketing. And you've also got the EU, an enormous economic market, really strictly trying to regulate AI, as does China. So the United States is really one of the only places that leaves the doors as open as we do. And even here, the courts are starting to creep into the pockets of these companies in a way that I think is going to concern them. So I think just in the same way that once upon a time, you and I would have been smoking cigarettes together, Mark, on this podcast, on your show, we're no longer doing that. It took a while to get back into a world in which we were holding companies responsible for the death that cigarettes created. It took a while. We're slow in that world, but we do get there. So I like to think that we're going to get there.
I like that parallel too, because that reference speaks to sort of what we've been dealing with the last day or so. Remember, there were doctors smoking cigarettes as they were recommending, Camels or, a pack a day or whatever it was. Or
that's right. The pause that refreshes.
And so the idea somehow that we just dealt with this in the medical community, the quackery of the RFK Jr. world is somehow speaking to Tylenol. And, you realize how, you gotta pick your science and look at real data,
That's right.
I want to double back. This is my last, because I get these emails from members of our audience who are very much into tech, and they'll send me these videos of robots that do all of these things, and they'll also speak to AI. And of course, the idea that we'll all have sort of personal AI agents, that my agent will speak to your agent. We'll set up this conversation instead of using people to actually coordinate it. It'll be my agent and your agent that'll coordinate it. Like, what could possibly be wrong with this? Speak to that and how that either grows into a good thing or how it also gets perverted into a bad thing.
The stat that I keep coming back to is it's represented in a chart that I post all the time on theripcurrent.com where I do my Substack and my newsletter. Sorry, my newsletter and my podcast. And this chart shows over time where the salary of your average clerk in a retail environment, let's say a pharmacy, how that salary since the 1970s has been more or less constant. Adjusted for inflation, it's the same amount of money as ever. But the work responsibilities of that person have gone up more than tenfold. And this is why when you go into let's say a small town hotel in the middle of the night to check in, the person who greets you at the front desk is usually the only person on duty in that hotel, right, at that hour. When you go, like literally the only person. I've been in that position multiple times. Or, when you go into a pharmacy and everything is locked up, part of it is that there aren't enough people working in that place to keep track of who's stealing stuff or not. So to my mind, the United States is the history of how we use labor in this country is never, if you get to a labor saving place, then we're going to let everybody go and paint watercolors in their garden. So the idea, right, that AI is going to somehow free us up to have more time, that has never ever been true. There's something called the Jevons Paradox that back in the 19th century, this guy was figuring out that they were running out of coal in England, even though they were using coal more efficiently than ever. And it's come to describe what it is that when we make a thing that uses something more efficiently, we just end up using more of that stuff. So my worry is as we use our time more efficiently, you're going to have AI basically, push people into working 10 times as hard for the same money. The last thing I'll leave you with, Sam Altman a few months ago said in a podcast that he and some of his buddies have a text thread going in which they are betting on which financial quarter they will see a one-person, $1 billion company emerge. That is the dream. No employees, just a single person. I don't care how many gardeners you employ, you're not going to be able to employ us all. And so that is the direction that we're going right now, Mark.
Wow. It's so interesting, Jake. Really love your podcast and love your takes. And what is the paradox again? The
Jevons Paradox, Jevons.
Jevons Paradox.
William Jevons. That thing will blow your mind. Yeah, we are not good at saving labor, you guys. We're going to use more and more of it.
It's the ripcurrent.com. There's also the Substack. We'll have links to everything. There it is. Look at you, Tony, with the Jevons Paradox there, the hybrid car example.
That's right. We drive further and further the more efficient the car becomes. Rather than using it less, right? Rather than do that, suddenly we're driving more and more and more. That's right.
Very, very cool. Loved our conversation. Let's do it again soon. As I say, we'll have links to your stuff under this video and beyond. And I look forward to our next go round. Thanks, Jake.
Mark,
Ward.
I so appreciate it. Big admirer. Thanks, buddy.
Okay. All the best. Jacob Ward. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great.
Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.